Okay, so what you're looking at here is an 11-pound propane tank, former propane tank. That's where the valve used to be, and I cut a hole in there so that you can fit your hand right down in there. Helps to clean out all the filings from cutting the notes, because there's a lot of filings, believe me. There's tons of filings. So, and you can use a magnet to clean them out. You can wash it out. You know, there's all kinds of things you can do. I don't recommend painting them, because painting apparently changes the weight of the note, and they go out of tune a lot easier when they're painted. So it's best to just strip them down bare, strip the paint off, sand it up nice, and keep it oiled. That's the recommendation. To keep rust off, because rust will also change the weight of the notes. So you want to keep it oiled so it doesn't rust. But bare metal's the way to go, apparently. And I found it sounds really, really nice. Now, this is the 3 notes I cut on this side with a rotary tool to make a slot, and then enough to get the jigsaw in, and then cut these with the jigsaw. Keep it well oiled. I recommend oiling, because the oil will help the blade last a lot longer. I used 1 blade to do this entire drum. I snapped the first blade, and I've only used 1 other blade so far. So here's how it sounds so far. That's the 3 notes I've cut there. Now you can use magnets to tune these things as well. If you put magnets on the bottom end of the tongue, it raises the note. If you put magnets on the inside, underneath the tongue up here, it lowers the sound of the note. Just like taking weight off of the end of the tongue. Now that's the lesson I learned here, is using the original Dennis Evlin Hank drum design with C and D and all the other notes that were recommended. Everything turned out nice. Except C is like way low. So the C note, compared to like high C, which is a nice sounding note, this doesn't sound so nice. So what I'm going to do is, where this line is, I'm going to start there anyway and work my way down if I have to, but I'm going to shave off weight from the end of the tongue. I'm going to shave the end of the tongue off, and that will take weight off, and hopefully that'll raise the pitch of the note. It should. That's the only way to correct that. I had to do that a little bit on the A note here because it was near a G, so I had to bring it down to up to an A, sorry. It was down to a G, I had to bring it up to an A by shaving some off. So I'm going to turn the D into an E, because this is going to be D now. So good tip is not to go with the low, the really low note like the low C. It's just too low. Okay, we are back, and we left off with me cutting the notes to turn the C into a D, which I successfully managed to do, and turning the D into an E, because the C sounded too low and too dead sounding, and it sounds a lot better now, I'd say. Resonates much nicer. I did have to take a considerable amount out, a lot more than I thought I did, but not a terrible big amount. And at least it's even. But it sounds really great now. Resonates really nicely. Now this sounds really good. This is the full scale on the other side. My wife absolutely loves it. Engraved her name on it and everything. Engraved each one of the notes on there. You can see that. I'm not the greatest engraver, but sounds great. I do highly recommend cutting the hole, because the hole allowed me to clean out a lot of filings in there which would have rusted and changed the sound of the drum. It did change the sound of the drum, for that matter. When I was testing it and tuning it, I noticed that after I cleaned everything out, I took the air compressor to it and blew out all of the stuff. I washed it too and dried it with the air compressor, and it made a huge difference. I got a ton of filings out of here, ton of them, that would have really changed the sound of the drum, I think, especially if they rusted over time. So yeah, I only went through one after I snapped the first blade, cutting the first note on the other side with no lubrication. I changed to oil and cut every one of these with oil and used one blade for the entire drum. So after the first initial note, every other note was done, both sides, with one blade. That's why I recommend cutting the straight edges rather than the round edge. Even do the arrow type, the point. Okay, so as I was saying before, the iPhone so rudely cut me off because I didn't have enough space. I highly recommend cutting square notes, because jigsaws don't really like to work on curves. You'll see a lot of them are curved, people's keys for these things. I recommend using the arrow, the pointed ones or the squared off ones, but work at right angles, you know, like work in straight lines, because jigsaws don't like to go on curves. They bind and they catch the steel and they burn up and you snap a lot of blades. So if you're a beginner, I would highly recommend going with the squared off notes. They're a lot easier to cut. Just cut, cut, cut. You cut your slot with a Dremel for your jigsaw blade to fit in, stick it in, and away you go. Keep that blade lubed up with oil. You'll save your blades. Now here's the templates I used. These were all based on a guy's YouTube video that I'm going to mention later. One of his measurements for high B was 1 7/8, which somebody had trouble tuning to B. They never could. They said that it was 2 1/8, which seems to be right. I measured it as 2 1/8 and 2 1/8, and it worked out fine. When you cut notes, you want to cut short of the end and then hacksaw down by hand, not with the jigsaw, because you want to fine tune it slowly. If you try to do it with the jigsaw, you're going to go too quick and you'll end up screwing up the note. I did it. I had to cut a note back. So high B is 2 1/8 by 2 1/8. Every other measurement was bang on for every one of these notes, and this is a full scale. These are all threes, like B3, D3, E3, F3, C3. These are all fours, like C4, D4, E4, right up to B4. And here are the measurements for anyone who is interested in making their own. I don't know how well you can see that. And there are the measurements for the high notes. And that's basically all there is to it. And you can make your own. I did. And she loves it. I love it. I think it's great. It sounds awesome. Thanks for watching. Okay. After playing it for a while, I've noticed that, and this is something that a YouTube user named Tank Drum mentioned, and he said not to put too many large notes on one side, which is pretty much what I did here by originally cutting a C and a D and then turning it into a D and an E. Having the C and D and this large A3 over here, all three of these, that's too many large notes on one side. What happens is they ring sympathetically with each other. So when you hit one, it resonates off of the other ones and you can feel them vibrate. It doesn't sound bad. It just sounds like one note is ringing off of the other ones. And you can hear it when you play a bunch together, when you hear they all sort of blend together, and that's what he was talking about, was having too many large notes on one side. It rings out too much. So just a good tip, don't put too many really big notes on one side on these 11-pound tanks. You might be able to pull that off on a 20-pound tank, sure, but you probably can't pull it off on these little 11-pounders. Because it's just too many large notes. Luckily I went with a C4 here, which was a smaller note, or else it might have been really, really bad. It turned out, relatively okay. But definitely this is my favorite side, and this is my wife's favorite side because it's all high notes, and it sounds fantastic. But this side, sounds okay, but just a good tip, don't put too many big notes on one side. Okay, time for shoutouts. I'd like to give a shout out to Mef Joris. Mef Joris has a video on YouTube that shows you how to build a propane tank drum. And remember folks, start with an empty new tank unless you know how to purge a tank properly. You don't want to start cutting into an old tank unless it's been properly washed out. You have to wash them out with soap and water after you remove the valve to get rid of any fumes, or else you could blow yourself up. Not a good idea. So preferably start with a new tank, or properly purge an old one. There is a guy that I'm going to make reference to later that does this with a used tank, but even he gives you the same warnings. So, Mef Joris's video. This is a really interesting one from Celestial Hunter Drums, Loft Street, by Gregory Karabench, and it's called The Birth of a Steel Tongue Drum. This guy actually takes 20-pound tanks, cuts them down to 11-pound tanks, and it's an amazing video to watch because he goes right through cutting a tank and everything. It's just it's quite an undertaking, and he does a beautiful job, and it sounds fantastic. Now, I'd really like to give a shout out to Tank Drum. This guy makes some of the most beautiful sounding tank drums you've ever heard, and he helped me out a lot. He really had some good advice. you'll see my comments there and him responding, and he was a huge help. So thank you very much, Tank Drum. Great advice. And if I go back to my favorites here, also give a shout out to Miltone Drums, and he has a magnetic tuning method. That's why you have the hole in the center, so that you can put magnets on the underside to change the tone of your notes, which is a really neat idea. You don't need to cut to retune the thing. He shows you how to do it with magnets, just like he's doing here. Awesome. Just a great way to simply retune the drum. And Miltone Drums had a great video demoing how he uses magnets to change the pitch. So, and there's one last one here that I'd like to give a shout out to. This would be, okay, as I was saying before the iPhone cut me off again, I was giving a shout out to Christopher Robinson and his video, A Propane Tank Drum, and his video is really good on how to build one. It was another one that I thought was pretty good, and he even mentions about the you know, if you're going to use a used tank, then make sure to purge it first with water overnight after you remove the valve. You know, you got to be really careful with used tanks. So yeah, that's all the shout outs for how I built mine. I followed all these guys' instructions, and it came out fine. Thanks for watching.